November. The month when the Appalachians go quiet. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. The kind that presses against your eardrums until you can hear your own heartbeat echoing inside your skull. Hey, it's me again. Welcome back to Fear Begins. If you love true stories that make you double-check your locks before bed, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button because tonight we're going deep into the Appalachian wild where the mist carries whispers and old legends wake up hungry. Now let me tell you about the first story. It's one I wish I could forget. Because even after all these years, when the November wind howls through the trees outside my cabin, I still hear it. The same sound I heard that night. It started 3 years ago. The kind of night that feels cursed before anything even happens. The weather forecast said light drizzle. What we got was a storm that felt alive, sleet rattling on the windows, the wind dragging through the trees like claws scraping bark. I was alone in the cabin my grandfather built back in the 50s. He used to say the mountains protect you if you respect them. But that night I wasn't so sure the mountains were on my side. The power flickered around 8 p.m. I didn't think much of it, just another Appalachian blackout. I lit a couple of old oil lamps, made some coffee, and sat near the wood stove, listening to the storm chew through the valley. That's when I heard it. A knock, 3 short raps on the door, steady, deliberate. At first I thought maybe it was a branch, maybe even an animal. But no, the sound came again. Knock, knock, knock. No one in their right mind would be out here during a storm like that. The nearest neighbor was 6 miles down the dirt road, and even then they never came by after dark. I called out, "Hello? You okay out there?" No answer, just wind hissing through the cracks. And then another knock. This time, slower, harder, like whoever was outside was running out of patience. I froze. The cabin suddenly felt smaller. The walls seemed to close in. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it toward the door. The window beside it was fogged from the heat of the fire, but I could see a shape, tall, still. It wasn't moving, but I swear it was listening. "Who's there?" I called again. Nothing. Then a voice, low and cracked like old wood. "Can I come in?" It wasn't loud, barely more than a whisper, but it cut straight through me. Every instinct said no. But my brain started arguing. What if it's someone lost? A hiker. Someone whose car broke down on the ridge road. I took a slow breath, stepped closer and said, "Who are you?" The voice answered, "Cold, that's all." Just that word. My skin prickled. Something about the tone wasn't right. It didn't sound like a plea, it sounded rehearsed. I unlatched the chain, cracked the door just an inch, and my flashlight flickered out. Pitch black. The only sound was breathing. Not mine. Deep, slow, deliberate breathing right on the other side of the door. I slammed it shut, threw the latch back, and stumbled toward the wood stove. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it echo through the cabin. Then I realized the knocking had stopped. But something was still moving out there. I could hear the crunch of boots, or paws, circling the porch, then scraping down the side of the cabin. I turned every lamp on, praying the light would scare it off. For a minute it worked. Silence. Then a whisper. Right outside the window. Cold, I didn't dare look. I just sat there, gripping the handle of the axe my grandfather used to split kindling, staring at the flames dancing in the stove. And then a new sound. The back door creaked. There was no way someone could have gone around that fast without making noise through the leaves or gravel. The creak stopped. Then footsteps. Inside. I spun around, light shaking in my hand. Nothing. But the cabin didn't feel empty anymore. The air shifted, heavier, thicker, as if someone invisible was standing right behind me. I could feel it. A cold breath grazing the back of my neck. I didn't turn around. I couldn't, because deep down I knew if I looked, I'd see something I wouldn't survive remembering. I bolted for the bedroom, slammed the door, and locked it. No phone signal, no power. Just the sound of the storm and my own heartbeat thudding in my ears, and then, through the noise, I heard it again. That word. Cold. Whispered from inside the room. I turned my light toward the sound and saw my own breath fogging the air in front of me. But the window was closed. The stove was burning hot. There shouldn't have been cold air anywhere near me. That's when I saw the outline, faint, almost human, standing by the wall. Not moving, just there. I blinked. Gone. Just the sound of the wind. I didn't sleep that night. I sat against the wall, axe in hand, waiting for dawn. When the sun finally came, I found footprints outside the cabin, bare feet, leading from the forest right up to my door. And then they stopped. No prints going back. Just vanished. That day I packed my things and left. I thought I'd never come back. But sometimes, late at night when I drive through those mountains in November, I still see the same footprints on the roadside, pressed into the mud, waiting. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days straight, and by the fourth night the mountain road looked like a river of mud and silver light. I was driving back from my cousin's place in Boone, trying to beat the fog that always rolled in after midnight. My old truck felt smaller than usual, like the darkness was squeezing it from all sides. The wipers dragged across the glass with that tired, rubbery squeal. I remember thinking how that sound could drive a person mad if they listened long enough. Then, for a second, the headlights caught something on the edge of the road, a flash of pale like a hand or maybe an animal's flank, and then it was gone. I told myself it was a deer. Everything up here is a deer until it isn't. The radio was nothing but static. I tried calling my cousin to let her know I made it out of the valley, but the call never connected. No signal, no service, just the slow rhythm of rain on metal and the hum of the engine. That's when the fog rolled in. Not gentle, not gradual. It was like someone poured a bucket of milk over the world. I could barely see the hood. Every time I rounded a bend, my stomach clenched because I couldn't tell if the road even existed anymore. Then the smell hit me. Damp earth, yes, but underneath it something old. Sweet, almost metallic like rust or forgotten fruit. I thought maybe it was the truck. Maybe something burning under the hood. But the smell didn't fade when I stopped. It thickened. When I got out to check, the sound hit next. No thunder, no wind, just the soft, steady drip of water falling from the trees above. Except there weren't trees right there. I was on an open stretch of road. Drip, drip, drip. Each drop seemed closer than the last, like something was creeping toward me in rhythm with the rain. I looked up, but the fog swallowed everything above my headlights. I remember thinking, don't turn the truck off, don't kill the engine. But curiosity is louder than fear sometimes. I stepped closer to the side of the road, shining my phone light into the fog. The beam barely went 3 feet before it hit something, cloth dark and wet, hanging from a low branch that shouldn't have existed. Then I realized the cloth was moving. Not swaying with wind, shifting like it was breathing. I stumbled back and nearly dropped the light. That's when I saw them, faint shapes, almost human, standing among the fog. Not walking, not turning, just waiting. I bolted for the truck, slammed the door and locked it. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely turn the key. The engine growled back to life and I told myself to drive. Just drive. But the fog didn't lift. If anything, it grew thicker, almost alive. The shapes disappeared behind me, but I could feel something pacing the edges of the road as I moved, never in sight, always just beyond reach. At one point I glanced at the passenger seat. The seatbelt was fastened. I never fasten it when I'm alone. It was like someone invisible had buckled themselves in. My chest tightened. I slowed down, listening to the creak of the old belt shifting slightly. Then came a sound that didn't belong inside the cab, a sigh, faint but unmistakable. Every instinct screamed to stop, but stopping meant being still, and stillness out there felt like invitation. So I kept going, headlights cutting through white nothing, rain smearing across the glass like veins. About 20 minutes later, I saw a small cabin light through the fog, a warm glow flickering between the trees. Relief flooded me. Maybe someone could help. Maybe I could wait out the storm. The driveway was nothing more than two muddy ruts, but I followed them up to a porch where a single lantern burned. I honked once. Nothing. When I got out, the fog shifted like curtains parting. The air was completely still. I called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded wrong, like it didn't belong in that place. A door creaked open. No one came out. Inside was just one room, wood stove, table, 2 chairs. And on the table, a stack of photographs spread out like someone had been studying them. They were all of the same road I had just driven. Everyone taken from the same angle, headlights in fog, dark outlines along the shoulder, and in the most recent one, my truck. My license plate, my mouth went dry. I backed toward the door, but it shut on its own before I reached it. The lantern light flickered, dimmed, then flared bright enough to paint everything in gold for half a second. And that's when I saw the photos weren't on paper. They were burned into wood, like someone had pressed the images into the grain with heat. I ran. I didn't care where the road led anymore. I just needed to get away from that place. When I finally broke through the fog an hour later, I pulled into a gas station. The attendant looked at me like I'd crawled out of a grave. "Rough night?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, still shaking. "Ran into some weird fog back there." He nodded slowly. "You came down the old ridge road, didn't you?" I hesitated. "Yeah, why?" He leaned on the counter, eyes flicking toward the window like he didn't want to be heard. "People stopped using that road after the storm in '92. Whole stretch washed out. Ain't been repaired since." I laughed a little, confused. "No, man, I just drove it. The asphalt's cracked, sure, but it's there." He didn't smile. "Son, that road's gone. Washed clean off the map. Whatever you were driving on," he paused, lowering his voice, "wasn't ours." When I went back to the truck, I looked at the tires. They were spotless. No mud, no gravel, no rainwater. Just clean rubber like I'd never left pavement. I drove home without the radio, without music, without breathing too deep. For weeks I couldn't shake that smell, the rust-sweet one that clung to my jacket and hair. Sometimes when it rains now and the fog drifts low through my town, I'll see faint headlights move past my window. No car follows, just that light. And if I listen closely enough, beneath the rain and the wipers and the hiss of the night, I swear I can still hear it. That sigh from the passenger seat, soft and patient, waiting for me to take the ridge road again. The third night in November always does something strange to me. The air feels heavier, like the mountains are holding their breath. That was the night I learned there are things up here that don't follow the same rules as the rest of the world. It started simple. I'd taken the back road home from a late shift at the mill, longer but quieter. The rain had just stopped, and mist hung in ribbons along the tree line. Every so often a drop of water would fall from a branch and explode on the windshield. That little sound, the tiny snap of cold water against glass, was all I could hear. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the dark. Everything outside that beam felt like another world. The trees on the ridge looked like they were leaning closer every time I blinked. At first, I thought I was alone on that road. Then I saw the taillights. Far ahead, 2 red dots floated in the fog like eyes. They stayed the same distance no matter how fast I went. I couldn't tell if the car was moving or not. It just glowed there, steady and wrong. When I finally caught up, the lights vanished. Not turned off. Just gone. I slowed down. The road was empty. No car, no turnoff. Just wet asphalt and silence. That's when I realized the radio had gone dead too. No static, no hum, just a hollow buzz like the speakers were breathing. I turned the knob, but the noise didn't change. Then faintly through that hum, I heard something, a voice. Or maybe not quite a voice, more like words whispered underwater. It said my name. I froze. No one should have known I was out here. Who's there? I said out loud, stupidly to the empty cab. The whisper stopped. Then something answered. Not through the radio. From the back seat. It was the sound of fabric shifting. Slow. Careful. Like someone turning slightly. Trying not to be noticed. The hairs on my arms stood up. I didn't look in the mirror. I couldn't. I just gripped the steering wheel tighter and whispered to myself, "It's nothing. It's just the sound of the truck settling." But I could feel it, the weight. There was more weight in the truck than before. Like something else was sitting behind me, breathing shallow and steady. The fog swallowed the road. I could barely see the yellow line under the tires. Then a faint light appeared through the mist ahead, a flickering porch light on a small wooden cabin. I didn't recognize it, but I pulled over anyway. I needed air. I needed space. When I opened the door, the smell of rain and pine rushed in. Clean, sharp grounding. I took a deep breath and turned around to grab my coat from the back seat. The seat was empty. No one there. No marks, no footprints. But the fabric was damp, like someone had been sitting there too long in wet clothes. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out into the fog. The cabin light flickered again, almost like it was signaling. When I got close, I saw the door was open just an inch, creaking gently in the wind. I called out, "Hello? You all right in there?" No answer. I should have left right then. But curiosity, that old curse, dragged me inside. The cabin was one room, old but tidy. A single chair by the window. A kerosene lamp on the table burning low. And on the floor a trail of wet footprints leading from the door straight to the wall, not to another door. Not to a window, just the wall. I followed them slowly, light shaking in my hand. When I got close, I noticed something strange. The wood paneling looked warped, like it had been soaked and dried too many times. When I touched it, it was cold, too cold. Then came a sound behind me, a faint drip. Water falling onto wood. I turned, expecting to see the leak, but the ceiling was dry. The sound came again, closer this time. Drip, drip, drip. Then I saw it. Water sliding down the back of the chair by the window. Dark streaks, thick and slow. The kind that doesn't come from rain. My breath caught. The lamp sputtered once, then steadied. The air in the room changed, tight, humming like static before a storm. And then, in the reflection of the window, I saw something behind me. A figure. Tall. Still. So still it almost blended with the shadows. I turned and there was nothing. Just the wall, the footprints, the lamp. I told myself I was imagining it. I backed toward the door, whispering, it's fine, you're just tired." Then the door slammed shut. The lamp flared white, then went out. I was left in darkness, and in that darkness something whispered again. This time I could hear it clearly. "You shouldn't have stopped. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning, like it pitied me." I grabbed for the handle, but the door wouldn't move. The wood felt soft, almost pulsing under my hand, like something alive was on the other side, pushing back. The whisper came again, closer now, almost in my ear. "You brought it with you." My heart pounded so hard I thought I might black out. I slammed against the door until it finally gave, spilling me out into the night air. I stumbled, fell into the mud and scrambled toward the truck. The fog was thicker now, swirling in slow, deliberate patterns like smoke underwater. When I looked back, the cabin was gone. Not collapsed, not dark, just gone. The porch light, the roof line, everything erased by the mist. I jumped into the truck, turned the key, and prayed the engine would catch. When it did, I tore down the road, headlights slicing through white nothing. Then I saw it. In the rear-view mirror, through the mist behind me, a single light followed. Not headlights, a lantern's glow, swinging slowly from side to side, keeping perfect pace no matter how fast I drove. I pressed harder on the gas. The light stayed the same distance behind. Then faintly through the noise of the tires and rain I heard that whisper again. Not from behind, from the passenger seat. "You brought it with you." I turned my head, and the seat beside me was wet. A single drop of water fell from nowhere, landing on my hand. When I looked back at the road, the fog cleared for a moment, and there it was, a sign I'd never seen before. Leaving Ridge Hollow, entering no return. The letters looked old, carved deep into the wood. I blinked, and the sign was gone. I made it home by dawn. I don't remember how, just the feeling of the truck door slamming behind me and the silence that followed. That night, I burned the clothes I wore. The smell of wet pine still clung to them no matter how much I scrubbed. For days after, I'd catch glimpses in my mirror. Not shapes, just movement. A shadow flickering past my shoulder like someone sitting behind me again. Watching. Waiting. Sometimes, when the fog drifts low down my road, I can hear it through the trees. A voice that sounds like my own whispering, "You shouldn't have stopped." I tell myself it's just the wind, just the mountain breathing. But every year when November comes back around, my radio dies in the same spot. The same whisper hums through the static, and every year I swear I see that lantern light again, keeping perfect pace behind me, no matter how far I run. There's something about the mountains in November that makes sound feel wrong. It doesn't echo, it lingers, like the trees are holding on to every noise, keeping it for themselves. That's how the fourth story begins, with sound, faint, far away, but impossibly close all at once. I had driven up to an old fire lookout tower deep in the Appalachian range just to get away for a few nights. I'd been coming apart quietly for months, too many sleepless nights, too many faces in my dreams that didn't belong there. So when a friend told me about the tower, a place where you could see the world disappear beneath a sea of fog, I thought solitude would help me breathe again. The road up was narrow, slick with half-frozen rain. Every bend looked the same, dark evergreens pressing close, branches clawing at the truck. I remember thinking it felt like the road was shrinking behind me, closing in, erasing where I'd come from. By the time I reached the tower, night had swallowed everything. The wind whistled low and steady, wrapping around the base of the structure. The cabin at the top swayed with each gust, creaking softly like it was whispering something I couldn't quite hear. The first night was uneventful. I unpacked, lit the small lantern inside, and climbed up to the platform to look out. The view was endless, waves of dark forest rolling out under a pale moon. No sound but wind. It was the kind of silence that feels alive. I fell asleep in the cot, still dressed, boots by the door. When I woke, it was to the sound of footsteps on the stairs, slow, measured, one after another. At first, I thought maybe it was a ranger, someone checking in, but the steps stopped halfway up. Then silence. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely a whisper. Nothing. I waited. My heart started to sink with the wind, uneven, nervous. Finally, I gathered enough courage to peer through the window. The fog had thickened overnight, curling around the tower like smoke. I couldn't see more than a few feet down, but I could hear the wood below me creak again, faintly, like someone shifting their weight. Then 3 knocks. Not on the door, on the outside wall. Knock, knock, knock. Perfectly spaced. Deliberate. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. The knocks didn't come again, and after a long moment, I convinced myself it had to be the wind, throwing something loose against the siding. That's all. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something out there had found the tower. Not by accident, but by sound. The next morning I found footprints at the base of the stairs. Bare feet, small like a child's, pressed deep into the mud. They led from the tree line to the tower and then back again. That second night, the fog didn't lift. The world beyond the tower was gone. I could see maybe 5 feet out before everything was swallowed by white. The wind had stopped, and that made it worse. Silence like that has a weight to it. Around midnight, I started hearing what I thought was rain. But when I looked out the window, there wasn't a drop falling. The sound wasn't outside. It was above me. Something was moving on the roof. The boards creaked softly like someone pacing back and forth. Then it stopped directly above where I was standing. I grabbed the flashlight, pointed it upward, and froze. Through the cracks in the old ceiling boards, I could see faint movement, shadows shifting, just enough to make out a shape that didn't make sense. It wasn't standing or crawling. It was hanging. I backed toward the stairs, but as soon as I touched the door, the light went out. The air inside the tower changed. It thickened, heavy, damp. And then the sound started again, right outside the door this time. Footsteps. Bare, wet. 1 step, pause, another. They climbed the stairs slowly, as if whoever or whatever it was knew I was listening. When they reached the landing, the floorboards groaned under the weight. A pause. Then something brushed against the outside of the door, dragging lightly. Fingertips maybe, testing. The handle rattled once, then stopped. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner until the first light of morning crept through the fog. When I finally opened the door, the steps were gone, but the mud on the landing told another story. There were prints again, but not walking away this time, only toward the door. That third night I almost left. The radio had long since died, and my phone showed no signal. I figured if I left before sunset, I could make it down the mountain before dark. But the fog didn't lift. It stayed thick, alive, like it wanted me to stay put. So I did. I spent the day pacing, trying not to look out the windows, trying not to listen. But the quiet became something else, too sharp, too deliberate. It was like the world outside the tower was holding its breath, waiting for me to do something wrong. Then, right as the light began to fade, I heard it again. Not footsteps this time. A voice faint, far below the tower, calling my name. At first I thought maybe it was my friend, maybe he'd come up to check on me. But the voice didn't sound right. It had that strange, delayed echo of something repeated through water. It called again, and again. Always the same tone, always the same words. I leaned out the window and shouted, "Who's there?" The voice stopped. The silence afterward felt alive. I waited, straining to hear even the faintest sound. Then the voice came again, closer this time. It didn't sound like my name anymore. Not exactly. More like something trying to shape it, to become it. That was the moment I realized the voice wasn't calling from the forest. It was coming from beneath the tower. I stepped back, flashlight shaking in my hand. The boards under my feet creaked in rhythm, one long groan, like the tower was breathing with me. Then came the faint sound of something brushing the underside of the floorboards. Slow, sliding, back and forth. I don't remember deciding to move, but suddenly I was halfway down the stairs. The fog was so thick I couldn't see the ground below. I aimed the flashlight into the white. Nothing. Just empty space. But the voice was right beneath me now. Soft. Almost kind. Whispering things I didn't want to understand. It said, "Come down. You're not alone." And I swear I felt a hand brush my ankle. Cold. Damp. I bolted back up the stairs, slammed the trapdoor shut, and shoved the chair over it. Then I sat on the floor and waited. Hours passed. Maybe more. Eventually I started hearing another sound, a quiet tapping on the window. Gentle at first, then more insistent. I turned slowly, dread crawling up my spine. Through the fogged glass, I could see the faint outline of a face. Small, pale, eyes wide open. The eyes didn't blink. Then the fog rolled in thicker, and the face was gone. By morning I had made up my mind. I was leaving, fog or no fog. I packed my bag, climbed down the stairs, and found the ground bare and dry. No footprints, no sign that anyone had ever been there. The drive down the mountain felt endless. Every turn looked the same. The radio came back to life halfway down, static hissing through the speakers. I almost cried from relief until I realized what I was hearing through the static. My own voice, repeating the same words, "Come down. You're not alone." The sound followed me all the way back to the main road. Then just as suddenly it was gone. The static cleared, and the silence came back, heavy as ever. I haven't been back to that mountain since. But sometimes when the November wind rattles my windows just right, I swear I can hear the creak of old wood, the faint rhythm of bare feet climbing stairs that aren't there anymore. And in that space between the gusts of wind, when everything goes quiet, I can still hear my name being whispered, drawn out, warped, echoing from somewhere impossibly far away, always followed by that same soft promise, "You're not alone." It started with the sound again. Not loud, not obvious, just there. A faint scraping beneath the quiet hum of the mountains. The kind of noise your brain tries to ignore until it can't. By the fifth night, I'd left the tower behind. I told myself I'd never go near that cursed place again. But the Appalachians don't let go easily. Their silence follows you down, wrapping around your thoughts like fog. You can leave the mountain, but it doesn't leave you. After what happened at the lookout, I stayed with an old friend, Eli, who owned a cabin deeper south, still in the range, but closer to a main road. He said the quiet there was different, kinder. I wanted to believe him. The first thing I noticed about Eli's cabin was how still it felt. No creaking wood, no groaning wind, just that heavy kind of calm that makes you realize how loud your thoughts are. He handed me a mug of coffee and said, "Don't worry. Whatever happened up there, it's gone now. Mountains talk, that's all. Sometimes they just talk louder." I tried to laugh, tried to push away the memory of that voice whispering my name in the fog. That night, I slept in the small guest room next to a window that looked out into the trees. No fog, no rain, just moonlight falling across the pines like a thin layer of frost. I told myself I was safe. Then, sometime past midnight, I woke up to that sound again. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. It came from the far corner of the room near the dresser. I sat up slowly, my pulse climbing, the sound somehow both faint and impossibly close. I whispered, "Eli." No answer. The scraping stopped. Then, after a breathless moment, I heard something else. Something worse. Breathing, soft, steady, just a few feet away. I reached for the lamp, hand shaking, and turned it on. Nothing. The corner was empty. The air thick still. My reflection in the mirror looked pale and distorted, like the glass itself was fogged from the inside. I turned the lamp back off, heart pounding. Maybe it was an animal under the floorboards, I thought. Mice, squirrels, anything that wasn't that. But sleep didn't come back. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the fog at the tower again, rolling in slow, swallowing the world piece by piece. When morning came, Eli noticed I looked off. I told him I hadn't slept much. He just nodded, like he'd heard it before. After breakfast, he said he wanted to show me something. We walked behind the cabin, through a narrow trail that led to an old well, half covered in vines. The stones around it were black with moss, slick with dew. "This thing's been here longer than the cabin," Eli said, tapping the edge of the well. "Some nights you can still hear water down there." I leaned over the edge carefully. It was deep, so deep that the bottom vanished into a darkness that seemed to swallow the light itself. Then I heard it, a faint echo, a whisper. I pulled back instantly, my stomach twisting. "Did you hear that?" I asked. Eli frowned. "Hear what?" It sounded like, I hesitated, like someone talking. He laughed quietly, but his eyes didn't match the sound. "That's just the wind through the stones. Happens all the time, but I knew wind, and that wasn't wind." That night, the silence in the cabin was heavier than before. Every floorboard seemed to hold its breath. The woods outside felt different, like they were listening. I sat by the window long after Eli went to bed, watching the tree line. The moonlight had dimmed behind thin clouds, turning everything to shades of gray. That's when I saw it. Movement. A shape between the trees. Too still to be an animal. Too tall to be human. It just stood there, half hidden behind a trunk, watching the cabin. My mouth went dry. I blinked once, twice, and it was gone. The woods were empty again. I told myself it was a trick of the light. Exhaustion, paranoia, anything but what it felt like. But when I finally turned away from the window, something made me stop cold. The mirror above the dresser, the same one from last night, was fogged again. Not from heat or breath. It looked touched, smudged, like a hand had pressed against the glass from the inside. I stared at it, heart hammering, and for a moment I thought I saw the faintest outline of something behind my reflection. Something tall, something waiting. I didn't sleep again. I sat in the chair by the window, every sound amplified, the faint hum of the wind, the soft creak of the roof, my own shallow breathing. Around 3 a.m., the scraping came back. Louder this time, not from the corner. From underneath the bed I froze. The air went still. Scrape, pause, scrape, slow, deliberate. I leaned over, flashlight in hand, and shined it under the bed. Nothing, but the moment I sat back up, the noise moved. Now it was coming from the hallway. Scrape. Then a faint tap, 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 like someone dragging their fingers along the wall as they walked by. The sound stopped outside my door. For a long time, nothing happened. Just silence. Then, one soft knock. I held my breath. Another knock. Then a whisper, low and drawn out, coming through the wood like breath through glass. "Let me in." My stomach dropped. The voice was wrong, too calm, too steady. And worst of all, it was Eli's voice. But Eli was asleep in the next room. I didn't answer. I just sat there shaking, waiting for it to stop. After what felt like forever, the footsteps moved away, slow, uneven. When morning finally came, the door was wide open. I hadn't moved all night, and I knew I hadn't touched it. Eli found me sitting in the same chair, pale and silent. He didn't laugh this time. He said, "You shouldn't have gone near that well." I asked him what he meant, and he just shook his head. "They say it's not empty." Not really. The stories go back generations. People used to hear things from down there, voices that sounded like someone they loved, calling their name, asking them to listen. He looked out the window toward the woods and said quietly, "The mountain remembers the ones who listen." We packed up that morning. Eli said we should leave for a few days, let the air clear. But before we could, I realized something that made my skin crawl. The marks near the window, the smudges on the glass, weren't random. They formed a pattern, 5 long streaks, like someone had dragged their fingers downward. And at the very bottom, just faint enough to miss at first glance, were small prints, child-sized. That night, I stayed awake in the truck, parked down the road. I could see the cabin through the trees. The windows were dark, still, but just before dawn I saw light flicker inside, a faint glow moving from room to room, then a shadow crossed the window. Too tall to be Eli. It stopped for a moment, turned toward the glass and stood perfectly still, as if it knew I was watching. Then slowly, it lifted its hand. 5 long streaks appeared across the inside of the window pane. When the sun finally rose, the cabin was quiet again. Eli was gone. The only sound left was the wind through the trees, and beneath it, faint but certain, that same scraping sound. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. I drove until the mountains disappeared in the rearview mirror. But even now, miles away, sometimes when the world goes quiet enough, I hear it again. Soft, measured, patient, waiting for me to listen. The rain started before sunset that evening, thin at first, a whisper against the windshield, then heavier, more insistent, like it was trying to say something. I was heading deeper into the Appalachian backroads, chasing what I thought was a shortcut through the mountains. My phone had lost service an hour ago, and the GPS arrow was frozen mid-turn, pointing into nowhere. The road stretched on like an endless ribbon of wet asphalt, vanishing into mist. I kept telling myself it would clear soon. It never did. The headlights cut through the fog in short bursts, revealing trees that leaned too close to the road, their bare branches scratching at the night. There wasn't another car in sight. The rain hit harder, the wipers struggling to keep up. I turned down the radio, and that's when I realized how quiet the world had become. No crickets, no wind. Just the hum of the tires on slick pavement and the rhythmic thud of the wipers. And then something flickered across the headlights. A figure. I slammed the brakes. The tires screeched against the wet road and the car fishtailed before stopping. My chest hit the steering wheel, the seatbelt locking tight. For a few seconds, I just sat there, breath fogging the glass, trying to see through the rain. Nothing. The road ahead was empty. I blinked, trying to steady my breathing. Maybe it was a shadow or a branch or exhaustion playing tricks. But then I noticed something odd. My headlights were dimming. Slowly. Like something was standing right in front of them. I couldn't see it clearly, just a vague outline in the mist. A human shape, but not quite. Taller, the proportions wrong. It moved, or maybe the fog shifted, but for one heartbeat, I swear I saw eyes reflecting the light back at me. Then it was gone. The lights brightened again, and the road was clear. I sat there for a long minute, engine idling, heart pounding. The logical part of me said drive, but something else, some quiet instinct, said not yet. I checked my mirrors. The road behind me was just as empty, and then the radio crackled. It shouldn't have. I'd turned it off. The screen stayed blank, but a faint static came through, soft and uneven. Then beneath the static, a voice. A whisper, "Keep driving." I froze. It wasn't my imagination. The voice was low, calm, and far too close. I reached for the dial, but before I could turn it off, the voice came again, clearer this time. "Don't stop." My stomach twisted. My hand hovered over the power button, but the voice didn't stop. It just kept repeating, "Don't stop, don't stop," until it began to fade into static again. Then silence. I sat there staring at the dashboard, waiting for it to happen again. When it didn't, I finally pressed the gas. The car rolled forward, tires hissing against the wet pavement. For a while, nothing happened. The fog thickened, but I kept going. The world narrowed to the two white lines beneath my headlights. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something moving along the tree line. A shadow, keeping pace with me. I told myself it was a trick of the light, but as I sped up, so did it. Always there, always just beyond the edge of sight. At one point, I thought I saw a hand, pale, long-fingered, brush against the trunk of a tree as it passed. That's when I realized I wasn't breathing. I forced myself to look straight ahead. Focus on the road. Don't look, but curiosity is cruel. I glanced sideways and it was gone. For the next few miles I told myself it was fine. The rain eased a little. The fog thinned. I even laughed once, quietly, just to hear a sound that wasn't my heartbeat. Then I saw the sign. It stood on the right side of the road, half hidden by vines and rain. The letters were faded, but I could still make them out. Welcome to Hollow Creek. I didn't remember passing through it on the map. But the road was twisting deeper into the mountains, and I figured maybe it was one of those old towns that barely existed anymore. I slowed the car, glancing around for any sign of life, houses, lights, anything. But there was nothing except trees and a single dirt road splitting off to the left. And that's when I saw her, a woman standing at the edge of the road. She wasn't moving. Her dress was pale and soaked through, plastered against her frame. Her hair hung heavy, hiding most of her face. At first I thought she needed help. I stopped the car, rolled the window down halfway and called out, "Are you okay?" No answer. The rain fell harder, drumming against the roof, filling the silence. I could barely see her through the downpour. Then she lifted her head. Her face was blank. Not expressionless blank. No eyes, no mouth. Just smooth skin where features should have been. I hit the gas. The tires spun on the wet road, and the car lurched forward. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I didn't look back. I couldn't. But the rearview mirror caught something I wish it hadn't. For just a second, I saw her standing in the middle of the road behind me. Only there were more now, dozens, all of them motionless. All of them turned toward my car. The road twisted again and I lost sight of them. When I finally stopped shaking, I realized I didn't know where I was anymore. The GPS still hadn't come back, and the road signs were gone. Even the rain sounded strange now, too soft, like it was falling in slow motion. Then the headlights flickered. Once, twice, and the car began to slow, even though my foot was pressing the gas. "Come on," I muttered, slamming the pedal. The engine groaned but wouldn't go faster. That's when I noticed the temperature gauge. It was dropping. Fast. The air inside the car grew colder with every breath, and my breath fogged the glass in front of me. Something moved in the fog on the windshield, not outside, inside. A shape pressed against the glass from the inside of the passenger seat window, like someone exhaling on it from the other side. Then a single word appeared in the condensation, drawn by a fingertip I couldn't see. Stop. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I didn't stop. The word smeared as the wipers dragged across the glass, and for a moment everything went dark. When the headlights flicked back on, there was someone standing in the middle of the road again. I swerved hard. The tires screamed, the car spun, and everything turned white as the fog swallowed me whole. When I came to, I was on the side of the road, the car idling, rain tapping gently against the hood. My head throbbed, but I was okay, somehow. I checked the clock. It said 3 a.m. Then I saw the road sign again. Welcome to Hollow Creek. Only this time, it was facing the other way, like I was leaving, but I hadn't turned around. The rain slowed to a drizzle. I rolled the window down, listening to the forest. For a long moment there was nothing. Then faintly from somewhere deep among the trees came the sound of a woman's voice. Not crying, not calling for help, just whispering. I strained to hear, but the words dissolved into the rain. When I looked back up at the sign, it wasn't there anymore. Neither was the road. Only trees. Endless and black. The engine sputtered once, twice, and went silent. And in the darkness that followed, the radio crackled again, just long enough to carry one last whisper, clear and cold. You shouldn't have stopped. Then the silence returned, heavy, absolute, and the mountains kept their secret. I was supposed to be home by midnight. That's what I kept telling myself as I drove through the twisting Appalachian roads that night, a mantra to drown out the rain hammering the windshield and the creeping sense that something wasn't right. My phone battery had died hours earlier, and my GPS had frozen on a blue dot that never moved. I hadn't passed another car in at least 40 minutes. It felt like the world had folded in on itself. The mist was so thick now it swallowed my headlights whole. The road dipped and curved endlessly, bordered by towering pines that seemed to lean closer with every mile. I tried the radio, desperate for human voices, but all I got was static, soft at first, then pulsing, like a heartbeat, and under it faintly, I thought I heard breathing. I turned it off. The silence after was worse. I rolled the window down an inch for air, and cold fog drifted in, wrapping around my face like fingers. Somewhere out there beyond the trees, something cracked, a branch maybe, or something stepping on it. I told myself it was a deer. It had to be, but the sound followed me. No matter how far I drove, that crunch of something pacing through wet leaves stayed beside me, always just out of sight. I pressed harder on the gas. The car groaned. The sound kept pace. Then I saw the cabin. It came out of nowhere, a tiny shape on the right side of the road, half swallowed by fog and vines. Its single light burned faintly through the mist, warm and golden. My first thought was help. Maybe they had a phone charger, maybe directions, maybe just someone awake. I pulled over. The tires sank into the soft mud. I left the engine running, the headlights cutting a path through the fog. The cabin door was slightly open, creaking with the wind. I hesitated, then stepped out. The air was colder than before. The rain had stopped, but the sound of dripping leaves filled the woods like whispers. I called out, "Hello? Anyone home?" Nothing, but there was movement inside. A shadow passed behind the curtain. I stepped closer. My shoes squelched in the mud, and for some reason, that sound, that tiny sound, felt too loud, like the night was listening. The porch steps groaned under my weight. The door was older than I'd thought, its paint flaking away in strips. I could see a faint glow deeper inside, maybe from a lantern or fireplace. I pushed the door open. The hinges screamed. The air that rushed out was heavy, thick with the scent of damp wood and something faintly metallic. I called out again, softer this time. "I'm sorry to bother you, but my phone's dead. And I think I'm lost." Still nothing. The cabin was one room. A bed in the corner, a table with 2 chairs, a fireplace that hadn't burned in a long time. The light came from an old oil lamp sitting on the windowsill. But what made my stomach twist was the chair pulled up beside the table. Someone was sitting in it, or had been. The figure was slumped forward, face turned toward the wall. For a long time I couldn't move. My brain kept trying to catch up. It looked like a person, but there was no sound, no movement, not even breathing. "Hey," I whispered. Nothing. I took one step closer. The floorboards creaked, and in that instant, the head snapped up. It wasn't fast, more like something heavy being pulled by invisible strings. The lamp flickered. I saw just enough to realize the figure wasn't looking at me. It was looking past me, behind me. I turned. The door was closing on its own, not slamming. Slowly, deliberately, as though pushed by unseen hands. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. When it shut, the room fell into almost total darkness. Then the whisper started. Low at first, impossible to place. Not quite inside my head, but not outside either. Like it came from the wood itself. "You shouldn't have come here." I stumbled backward, hitting the table. The lamp rocked, light jumping across the walls. And that's when I saw them. The photographs, dozens of them, pinned haphazardly along the wall by the bed. Everyone showed the same thing, a winding Appalachian road in the rain. My road. The same turns, the same angles, as though whoever took them had been following me for miles. In the last one, the headlights of a car, my car, were caught in the frame. I felt my throat close. A noise came from behind me, a dragging shuffle. I turned toward the chair again, but it was empty now. The figure was gone. The whisper grew louder, close enough that I felt it against my ear. "Leave." I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted for the door, slamming it open, stumbling into the fog. My car was still idling where I'd left it, headlights blazing into the trees. I didn't look back as I threw myself inside and peeled out, the tires spinning mud into the air. The road blurred beneath me. My hand shook so violently I could barely keep the wheel steady. I kept glancing in the mirrors, half expecting to see that shape from the cabin running after me, but all I saw was fog, endless white swallowing everything, and then the light ahead. For a moment, I thought it was another cabin, but as I got closer, I realized it was my headlights, the same curve, the same ditch on the left, the same cabin I'd driven in a circle. My chest went cold. I slammed the brakes, skidding to a stop in the same spot I'd been minutes before. The cabin light flickered once, twice, then went out. I killed the engine. Silence rushed in like a tide. The rain had stopped completely now. Not even a drip, not even wind. I sat there gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. Then tap a sound against the window, soft, fingertips on glass. I didn't look right away. I couldn't. But the tapping came again, slower this time, more deliberate. When I finally turned my head, I saw the shape of a hand pressed flat against the passenger window, pale, too long. The fingers leaving streaks down the glass as they dragged downward. I slammed the car into gear and drove. This time I didn't stop for anything. Not for the fog, not for the twists in the road, not for the faint light that kept appearing in my mirrors. A warm, golden glow that followed no matter how far I went. Hours passed before I saw another sign. Hollow Creek, 2 miles. I'd never been so relieved to see a town name in my life, but when I reached it, there was nothing there, just an empty crossroads. The faint outline of old foundations swallowed by moss. No lights, no people, no sound, only a single weather-worn sign nailed to a leaning post. I stepped out to read it, my flashlight trembling in my hand. It said, "Welcome back." That's when I realized the mud on my tires wasn't fresh. It had dried, cracked. And the clock on my dashboard, the one that had said 11:42 when I stopped at the cabin, now said 11:42 again, not a second more, as if time had never moved at all. I got back in the car, locked the doors, and sat there listening to the ticking of the cooling engine until the battery light flicked on. Somewhere in the trees, faint but clear, came the sound of tapping again, and when I finally dared to look up, the reflection in the windshield wasn't mine. It was someone sitting in the passenger seat, just a shadow, head turned toward me. I didn't look away until the glass fogged between us. Then I started the engine, drove into the mist, and didn't stop again until the sun rose behind the mountains. I never found that road again. I'd been driving since dawn, or at least I thought it was dawn. The fog made it impossible to tell. It felt like the mountains themselves were holding back the light, smothering it. I hadn't seen the sun in hours. My phone was dead again, of course. The GPS was frozen, the map a single mocking blue dot that never moved. The road wound endlessly upward, one switchback after another, until I began to wonder if I was still on any map at all. The road signs had stopped miles ago. The trees here were taller, denser, pressing close to the guardrails as though they were eavesdropping. Even the rain sounded strange, not like drops hitting metal or asphalt, but like whispers threading through the branches above me. At first I thought the exhaustion was playing tricks on me. The road had a way of stretching my thoughts thin, making me doubt what was real. But then, around one sharp curve, I saw something, a shape on the shoulder of the road. Someone was standing there, a figure, still, watching. I slowed down instinctively, squinting through the mist. The headlights caught something reflective, a bit of metal, maybe a belt buckle or a badge. The person didn't move. For a moment, I thought they might need help. Maybe another traveler stranded like me. I rolled the window down an inch and called out, my voice barely cutting through the fog. "Hey, you okay?" No answer. The figure didn't move an inch. I thought maybe I'd imagined them, that it was just a signpost or a trick of the mist. Until they turned their head. Slowly, too slowly. It was a smooth, almost mechanical motion, like a marionette being pulled by strings. The fog behind them shifted, revealing the glint of something metallic, not a badge, a mirror. They were holding a mirror in front of their chest, reflecting my headlights back at me. That was all I saw before my nerves took over. I hit the gas. The tires screeched on wet pavement, the car fishtailing for a second before catching traction again. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, the figure was gone. Completely. No shape, no light, no movement, just fog. I didn't stop again for miles. My hands ached from gripping the wheel too tight. Every sound, the wipers, the hum of the tires, even my own breathing, felt too loud in the silence of the mountains, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling I was being followed. It started small, a sense of weight behind me, a pull in my gut that told me I wasn't alone in the car. I kept glancing at the back seat in the mirror, convincing myself I'd see something there. Nothing until I did. It was brief. So brief I almost didn't believe it, but for a second, I saw another reflection in the glass. A face, not mine, not quite human. Just wrong. I jerked my head around. Empty. When I looked back at the road, something flashed across it. A flicker of movement, too fast to make sense of. I swerved and barely missed a tree, heart hammering in my chest. That's when I saw the sign. Old Hollow. 2 miles. The letters were faded, the wood cracked and dark with rot. Still, it was something, a destination, maybe a town. I drove toward it like it was salvation, but the closer I got, the stranger the air felt. It was heavy, still, like the whole forest was holding its breath. The fog thickened again, curling in pale tendrils across the road. When I reached the outskirts, I realized Old Hollow wasn't a town anymore. It was a skeleton. The remains of old buildings stood like gravestones. Crumbling cabins, collapsed barns, rusted signs that creaked in the wind. The main street was little more than cracked asphalt, split by weeds, and yet in the middle of it all, a single light burned, a lone gas station half swallowed by vines, with a flickering neon open sign struggling to stay alive in the window. I didn't want to stop. Every instinct screamed to keep driving, but I didn't have a choice. My fuel gauge was on empty, the needle trembling on the red line. So I pulled in. The light inside was dim, yellowed by dust and years. The shelves were mostly empty, a few rusted cans, a single pack of gum that looked fossilized. The air smelled faintly of mildew and something sweet beneath it, like old fruit. "Hello?" I called out, a beat of silence. Then from behind the counter, a man stepped out. He looked ordinary enough, middle-aged, thin, his face pale and expressionless. But there was something about his eyes. They didn't focus right. They seemed to slide past me like he was looking at something over my shoulder. "Need gas?" he asked. His voice was calm, even. "Too calm, yeah," I said. "Just passing through. My tank's almost empty." He nodded once. "You'll want to leave soon. Fog gets worse after dark, I noticed." I tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "You get a lot of travelers around here." He looked at me for a long time before answering. "Not anymore." I followed his gaze to the wall behind him. There were photographs pinned there, yellowed and curling with age. People standing by their cars, smiling. Each one had a handwritten note beneath it, dates, names, and then, eventually, just missing. One photo near the edge caught my eye. It was me, standing by my car. Same clothes, same headlights, but the date written beneath it wasn't today. It wasn't even this year. It was from 1997. I turned to ask him how it was possible, but he was gone. The store was empty. The air had gone cold. The buzzing neon light in the window sputtered once, then went out. I backed toward the door, fumbling for my keys, when a sound froze me in place. The soft, rhythmic tap-tap-tap of fingertips on glass. It came from the window near the counter. I turned slowly. There was nothing there. But the tapping didn't stop. It moved from one window to the next, circling the building closer and closer until it reached the door. I ran. Outside, the fog had thickened to a wall. I couldn't see the road, couldn't even see the trees, just the faint glow of my headlights bleeding through the mist. I jumped in, started the car, and floored it. For a few moments I thought I was free. The road opened up, the engine roared, and I could feel distance growing between me and that place. Then the radio turned on. I hadn't touched it. Static filled the cabin, crackling in and out, until a voice slipped through, soft, warped, and distant. "You can't leave Old Hollow." I slammed my hand on the power button. It didn't turn off. "You can't leave," it repeated, louder now. Then, silence. I exhaled shakily and looked in the rearview mirror. The fog behind me wasn't just fog anymore. It was moving, shifting, rolling after me like a tide, and in the heart of it, faint but visible, was a single light, warm and golden. The gas station light. It was following me. I drove until the road disappeared beneath me, until the fog swallowed everything. I don't know how long it lasted. Minutes, hours, maybe forever. But when it finally began to thin, I found myself at the same sign again. Old Hollow. 2 miles. I was back. I screamed, slammed my fists against the wheel, tried to wake up, to do something. But no matter which direction I drove, every turn, every hill, every mile brought me back to that same damn sign. Eventually, I stopped the car, turned off the engine, waited. The fog shifted around me like something alive, and somewhere in it, faint and steady, came that tapping sound again, closer this time, as if it was coming from inside the car. When I finally gathered the courage to look at the passenger seat, there was something there, a mirror, old, cracked, and fogged with condensation, and written across it, in the faintest trace of moisture, were 2 words, "Welcome back." The reflection that looked back at me wasn't mine. The mountains were quieter that night than I'd ever heard them. No wind, no insects, not even the low croak of frogs by the creek. Just an endless, heavy silence that felt like a living thing, pressing down, crawling into my ears until I could hear nothing but the slow, nervous rhythm of my own heartbeat. I was staying in a small cabin just off the old Blue Ridge stretch, one of those rentals meant for peaceful getaways. I'd come up here to clear my head, to get away from city noise, from people, from everything. November in the Appalachians was supposed to be beautiful, red leaves fading to brown, mist hanging low in the valleys. But that beauty hides something else, a loneliness that seeps into your bones. That night the air outside felt wrong. It had that thick, static weight before a thunderstorm, but there wasn't a cloud in the sky. I sat by the fireplace listening to the logs crackle, telling myself I was imagining the stillness outside. Then I heard it. A faint hum, at first. I thought it was the wind finding its way through the cracks in the cabin walls. But it wasn't random like the wind. It had rhythm, low, rising and falling, like someone humming a song with no melody, no pattern that made sense. It came from outside. I muted the crackle of the fire by throwing a blanket over it and held my breath. The hum didn't stop. It drifted between trees, soft and smooth, too human to be mistaken for nature. I grabbed my flashlight and stood by the window, trying to pierce the black between the pines. Nothing. Just the faint shimmer of moonlight on the branches, like 1,000 tiny mirrors catching the same breath of air. The hum stopped. I waited, counted seconds. Then 3 soft knocks came from the back door. Not loud, just polite. Like a neighbor who didn't want to disturb you too much but needed something. I froze. The cabin had no back porch, no motion lights, and I hadn't told a soul I was staying up here. The nearest town was a 40-minute drive away. Another 3 knocks, this time slower. I stepped closer to the door. Every part of me screamed not to, but I had to see. The old wooden handle trembled under my hand. I peered through the small diamond-shaped window on the top half of the door. The beam of my flashlight cut through the glass and landed on nothing but empty trees. And yet, the sound had been right there. I backed away, flashlight trembling in my grip. The hum started again, closer now. I turned off the light, my pulse thrumming in my throat. The sound grew sharper, taking on a strange layered quality, like multiple voices humming together, slightly out of sync, blending into a low, vibrating note that felt like it was coming from beneath the floorboards. That's when I realized it wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was inside. I turned toward the living room and froze. The fire had gone completely out. The embers were cold, and in the window, reflected against the faint blue light of the moon, I saw shapes. Not people. Not exactly. Silhouettes, faint and blurred, like fog caught in glass. There were several of them. Their outlines trembled with each note of the humming, like the sound itself was shaping them. I backed up until my shoulder hit the door. My brain scrambled to make sense of it. Maybe it was smoke. Maybe my eyes were adjusting wrong. But then one of the shapes moved closer to the glass. It leaned forward, and the humming stopped. The cabin went dead silent. I couldn't move. Every sound, even the crack of wood settling in the walls, made me jump. My heart pounded so hard, it felt like it was echoing through the empty space around me. Then from the window came a whisper. Not a voice exactly, just a breath against the glass that formed words I didn't understand. Syllables that didn't belong to any language I knew, and then it said my name, softly, almost kindly. Eli. Hearing my name in that voice broke something inside me. I dropped the flashlight, and the beam spun wildly across the ceiling. The moment it hit the window again, the shapes were gone. I ran to the front door, fumbled with the lock, and burst outside into the freezing night air. The forest was still, not silent anymore, though. Now there was a sound, a faint hum, behind me, from inside the cabin. I turned back just in time to see the light flicker in the window. It wasn't firelight this time. It was pale and cold, like the glow of a full moon reflected in water. And standing there, silhouetted against it, was me. My own reflection. I know what you're thinking. It was just a trick of the glass, a reflection from the light, some optical illusion. That's what I told myself too, until the reflection smiled. I wasn't smiling. My reflection raised its hand slowly, like a mirror gesture, only I hadn't moved. It lifted something, a small metallic object that caught the light. My flashlight. That's when I noticed mine was gone. I stumbled back, tripping over the step, eyes locked on that window as the reflection slowly lowered the beam toward the ground. The light from inside swept across the cabin floor, over the rug across the walls, and stopped at the back door. Something, was standing there, its hand pressed flat against the wood. Fingers long and pale. I didn't wait to see the rest. I ran for my truck, slamming the door shut and locking it twice. My breath fogged up the windshield as I tried to start the engine, but the key just clicked uselessly. Once, twice. Then the radio came on, at first just static. Then the faint hum again, the same tune, and through it, the whispering voice. "Where are you going, Eli?" I turned the key again. The truck sputtered to life. I hit the gas, tearing down the gravel road as fast as I could. Branches scraping the sides like nails on metal. But something felt wrong. In the rearview mirror, the cabin lights were still visible, glowing softly through the trees, but they weren't fading with distance. They were following. The hum grew louder, vibrating in the glass of the windshield. My teeth buzzed, my vision blurred. Then I saw the road sign ahead, now leaving Old Hollow. I didn't even realize I'd come this far. But as soon as I passed it, everything went dark. The hum stopped, the lights vanished, and I was alone. I drove another 10 miles before stopping on a ridge that overlooked the valley. The fog had lifted, and for the first time that night the stars broke through. I sat there, shaking, trying to make sense of what happened. That's when I saw something move in the rearview mirror again. Not a person this time. Not even a shape, just a shimmer, a faint ripple like heat haze. It spread across the glass, forming the faint outline of a face. My face, but older, tired, afraid. It whispered something I couldn't hear, the sound too faint, too far away. I leaned closer, and then it mouthed one word clearly: stay. The mirror went black, the truck engine stalled again, and when I looked up, the lights of Old Hollow were shining in the valley below, exactly where I thought I'd left them behind. I realized then the road hadn't led me out of the mountains at all. It had just curved back on itself the same way it always did, the way it always would. The hum returned, so faint I almost didn't hear it, threading through the trees like a lullaby, meant for something that didn't sleep. And I swear I can still hear it now. The last time I drove through the mountains that November, the fog was so thick it felt alive. It moved in slow waves across the asphalt, breathing over the road, swallowing the trees, the signs, and the world beyond my headlights. I had no destination that night, just the kind of restless urge that makes you drive for the sake of motion. But as the miles rolled on, something in that silence began to feel wrong. Not dangerous exactly, just aware. I remember how my wipers dragged across the glass, making that slow, tired squeak that sounds almost human when you're alone. The only color in the world was the red glow of my taillights reflected in the fog behind me. Even the radio wouldn't hold a signal. Static, then silence. Then, for a moment, a faint voice under the static. But when I turned the dial back, it was gone. I told myself I was imagining it. The road does that to you out here. Hours of nothing but turns and trees and dark. You start filling the emptiness with whatever your mind can find. I cracked the window to get some air, but the moment the glass lowered, a cold draft slipped in that smelled faintly of rain and wood smoke, and something else. It was faint, but it hit me in an instant, like wet earth mixed with metal, old rusted metal. That smell shouldn't have been there, not this high up, not this deep in the mountains. I shut the window again and tried to shake the unease building in my stomach. The fog thickened until I could barely see the end of my hood. My headlights hit something white up ahead. For a second, I thought it was a deer, but it didn't move. It just stood there in the center of the road, still and upright. When I got closer, I realized it wasn't an animal at all. It was a sign, hand-painted, crooked, stuck into the ground with 2 bent nails. Turn around. That was it. Black paint on old gray wood. I stopped the car, staring at it, half expecting someone to step out of the fog to explain. No one did. I rolled down my window again, peering into the mist. Nothing, no sound, no movement. Then the fog shifted. Just slightly, and I saw the faint outline of another car a few yards ahead. Parked on the shoulder, its driver's door was open. I hesitated, every rational thought telling me to leave. But something about the emptiness in that moment, how complete it was, made me feel like leaving would be worse. I put the car in park, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped out. The air was freezing. My breath came out in quick bursts of white. As I walked closer, I saw that the car was an old sedan, maybe from the early 2000s. Its lights were off, the engine dead. But the door really was open, and inside a faint smell lingered, coffee gone cold maybe, or dust. I leaned in. The keys were still in the ignition. The interior light flickered faintly with the breeze, like it couldn't decide whether to die or stay alive. There was a map on the passenger seat, creased and torn, A line had been drawn across it in black marker, looping through the mountain roads. But there wasn't an endpoint. Just a spiral. The spiral led back to the same road, the one I was standing on. That's when I heard it. The faint sound of gravel crunching behind me. I turned the flashlight toward the sound. Nothing. Just fog. Then, another crunch, closer this time. "Hello?" I called out, trying to sound calm. No answer. Only that same soft rhythm of slow, deliberate steps, just beyond the beam of my light. My throat went dry. I turned back toward my car, ready to leave, but when I looked up, my headlights were off. I hadn't turned them off. I ran. The moment I reached for the handle, I heard something move behind me again, something small, like a hand brushing against the metal of the abandoned car. I jumped into my seat and slammed the door, locking it out of instinct. My headlights flickered on by themselves. The fog glowed in the beams, and through it, faint shapes began to form. Not people. Not fully, just dark outlines that didn't move quite right. I couldn't make out faces. Couldn't tell if they were real or tricks of light. But one of them was standing directly behind the sign, the one that said, "Turn around." It hadn't been there before. My stomach twisted, my pulse racing so hard I thought I might throw up. I put the car in gear, hands trembling on the wheel, and hit the gas. The tires spun for a second before catching, throwing gravel behind me. I didn't look back. Not once. But I didn't get far. After maybe 5 minutes of driving, faster than I should have in fog that thick. I realized something. I was back at the same stretch of road, the same turn, the same sign, "Turn around." I hit the brakes so hard I skidded sideways, the car sliding to a stop on the shoulder. My brain refused to accept it, refused to believe what I was seeing. I threw it into reverse, spun around, and drove the other direction. 10 minutes later, there it was again, the sign. I started shaking. My hands, my chest, everything. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles went white, staring at the same piece of wood with its crude black letters, and then I noticed something different. There was another sign beneath it now, a second piece of wood nailed roughly below the first. Same handwriting. Same paint. You didn't listen. My throat went tight. The headlights flickered again. Something moved behind the sign. A shape. Tall, thin, wrong. The air outside shifted. A low hum crawling through the fog. It wasn't wind. It wasn't insects. It was deliberate. Like a vibration too low to hear, only feel. My teeth buzzed. The steering wheel trembled beneath my palms. I hit the gas again. The road twisted and turned. But no matter how fast I went, I couldn't find a way out. Every bend looked the same. Every tree. Every patch of fog. At some point, my dashboard clock froze. 2:47 a.m. It stayed that way for the rest of the night. The last thing I remember before it all went black was a sound in the passenger seat. A slow inhale. And then a whisper that came from just beside my ear. "Now you." No. When I woke up, it was morning. My car was parked outside a diner at the edge of town, sunlight streaming through the windshield. The fog was gone. The air was clear. The waitress said she'd seen me pull in just before dawn. Said I'd parked and just sat there, staring straight ahead for almost an hour before passing out. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, but as I looked out across the parking lot, my stomach dropped. Because on the back of the diner's wooden fence, nailed right into the boards, was a piece of old grey wood. The words were almost faded away. "Turn around." I asked the waitress about it, but she said it had been there for years. Said folks around here didn't mess with it. Mountain folks know better, she told me. Some things up there don't like to be followed. I left that morning and never went back. But sometimes on long drives, when the fog rolls in and the road starts to wind a little too sharply, I swear I can see that same wooden sign in the distance just for a moment, and every time I turn around because I don't know if what happened that night was real or if I was just too tired, too lost in the dark. But I do know this. Some roads in the mountains aren't meant to take you anywhere. They're meant to keep you there, listening,